All right, let's talk about the device that's probably in your pocket, in your hand, or at least within arm's reach right now. The smartphone. We take it everywhere. We rely on it for, well, pretty much everything. But how much do we really understand about what makes these things tick? And, maybe more importantly, why have they all started to look exactly the same?
And that's really the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, just look around. Almost every single phone out there today is just a slick little rectangle of glass and metal. It's a huge change from the wild and varied designs we used to have. So, what happened? How did we get here?
To figure that out, let's start at the beginning. We need to look at how we ended up with this single, totally dominant design. It's a story about evolution, but also about some very real constraints. If you remember the early 2000s, phone design was the Wild West. You had flip phones, candy bars, phones with full keyboards. Every company had its own unique look. And then, 2007. The first iPhone lands, and it completely changes the game with its one huge touchscreen. That single event kicked off what you could call the big screen wars of the 2010s, with every company racing to make the biggest display possible. And that race led us right where we are today, to the era of the glass and metal sandwich. And really, that's the whole story. The function has totally dictated the form. We, the users, demanded bigger screens for watching videos and browsing, and we demanded bigger batteries that could actually last a full day. Well, when your entire device has to be designed around two giant rectangles, the screen and the battery, you don't have a lot of room left over for creative shapes. And that right there is why we're surrounded by a sea of beautiful but very, very similar rectangles. So while the phones might look identical on the outside, the story on the inside, the one about money, power, and who's really winning, is a whole different ballgame. To really understand the smartphone industry, you have to follow the profit. Now, if you just look at the raw numbers of how many phones are sold, the market looks pretty competitive. Back in 2016, you see Samsung at the top, but Apple and Huawei are right there. And look at that huge other category, over half the market. You'd think there are tons of companies all successfully competing. But counting the number of boxes shipped, well, that's only half the story. And here is the other half. This is where it gets absolutely wild. When you look at who actually makes the profit from a phone, the picture totally changes. A company like Apple can take home 42% of the entire retail price in gross profit. Now compare that to the sliver of profit that all of the companies that make the individual parts get, combined. This tells you something crucial. The real value isn't in building the physical phone.
So if the value isn't in the hardware, where is it? It's in something called intangible assets. This is the secret sauce. It's not about owning the factories that assemble the phones. It's about owning the ideas. We're talking brand power, the thing that makes you want the latest model. We're talking about design patents and the mountains and mountains of intellectual property that make the software work.
And here's a mind-blowing example of that in action. Look at a company like Qualcomm. They have two main businesses. One business actually makes and sells computer chips, and it earns a pretty good 12% operating margin. But their other business just licenses their technology, their ideas, their intangible assets. And that division? It has an operating margin of 85%. The knowledge is worth over 7 times more than the physical thing itself. Incredible! Okay, so now we know why phones look the way they do and who makes the real money. But let's get back to the physical device in your hand. We pay a premium for these things, so why do they sometimes feel so fragile? And why is it so impossible to get them fixed? It all comes down to a fundamental conflict in how they're made. You see, engineers are caught in this constant tug-of-war between two different goals. On one side, you've got reliability. That's about building a fortress using stronger glass, sealing everything up tight to keep water out and preventing it from breaking in the first place. But on the other side, you have repairability. That's about making a device that's easy to take apart with modular components you can just swap out when they fail. The problem is, a perfectly sealed fortress is, by its very nature, almost impossible to repair. And this isn't some abstract problem, it affects all of us. I mean, think about the last time you had to get a new phone. Was it because of one of these things? A battery that just died way too fast? A cracked screen? Or you just flat out ran out of storage space? Some of these are straightforward hardware failures. Others, like no longer getting software updates, are a little more planned. And of course, there's always just wanting that shiny new model. The price we pay for this dilemma is very, very real. If your phone is out of warranty, fixing a cracked screen can cost you up to 40% of what you paid for the phone in the first place. And at that point, you just have to ask yourself, why would I spend that much to fix this old thing when I could just put that money towards a brand new one? That simple calculation pushes us to replace, not repair. For more than a decade, the smartphone has been a static, predictable rectangle. but now we're finally starting to see a real change in its fundamental shape. So let's look ahead to what might be the first big evolution in phone design in years, the foldable.
So what's the big idea with foldables? Well, they're a direct response to that design problem we talked about at the very start. We all want the biggest screen we can get, but we also need something that actually fits in a pocket. The promise of a foldable is simple but brilliant. It gives you this awesome mini tablet experience that you can just fold in half and carry around like a normal phone.
But, and there's always a but with new tech, it's all about trade-offs. The pros are obvious: a giant screen and an exciting new package. The cons, though, are pretty serious. They cost a lot more, they're heavier, and that complicated folding mechanism brings that whole durability question right back to the forefront.
Which leaves us with this quote, which really nails where we are right now. Are these foldable devices the actual future, the next step for all phones? Or are they just going to be a cool but ultimately niche product for tech nerds who are willing to pay a ton for the latest thing? Honestly, nobody knows for sure yet. For over a decade, this simple glass rectangle has defined so much of our digital lives. It's shaped how we talk, how we work, how we play. And now, as we're seeing the first real challenge to that shape, it makes you wonder about something bigger. If the phone itself transforms, how will our relationship with it change too? Thanks for watching.